You can't turn back time. But I wish I could go back in time and tell myself what not to do in this battle. Throughout this after-action narrative, I will highlight 5 mistakes done that brought disastrous results. Hey, and welcome back to Field of Glory 2, Late Antiquity bracket of Digital League, Season 12. We're playing Slav against our opponent Fluidwil, playing Scots-Irish. It all starts with analyzing the terrain and forces. In my deployment zone we have steep hills with rough terrain flowing into gentler hills towards the center of the map, with a forest covering the left side of the battlefield. My opponent has a number of hills in his setup zone and a forest mirroring our own on the left. There is a possibility of my opponent hiding units in the forest and behind a few hills towards the end of the map. In terms of troops, our opponent has Scots-Irish foot, picked Scots-Irish foot, picked warband, Celtic chariots, slingers and javelinmen, while we can bring armored noble cav, noble cavalry, irregular foot, javelin and light archers. We can also bring poorly armed rabble, but the only thing they are good at is hiding somewhere, padding out our forces' numbers. This means that our opponent has not only better variety of food, but his most basic food, Scots-Irish medium food, of average quality, lightly protected, armed with light spear and sword, is better than our irregular food, that is identical in every respect bar one. Only 50% of Slav foot formations are armed with swords, meaning that while on the charge they're equivalent, Scots-Irish foot is better in melee afterwards. The rest of the opponent's foot is clearly superior on both charge and melee. While we do have cavalry to balance this out, his light chariots can easily tie up our cavalry, prohibiting the flanking they would need in order to gain an advantage on Scots-Irish foot. There isn't much to deliberate about. I see no other choice than to bring full complement of javelinmen and light archers, full complement of noble cavalry and armored noble cavalry, but the bulk of our forces, as always, is irregular foot. I deploy half of my javelinmen supported by light archers on the left flank. They're going to protect the left flank and scout towards the forest in the opponent's deployment zone, with a possibility of putting pressure on the opponent's left flank from there. Armored noble cavalry, led by Commander-in-Chief, sets up on the central left, with the intention of making up the main flanking force on the left, avoiding the hill to the front left of them. Noble cavalry, set up on the center right, led by our sub-general, would mirror them and do a pincer maneuver from the right flank. Both irregular foot formations would move down the gentler slopes towards the center of the battlefield and hold them. The other half of the javelin and light archers are on the right flank, supporting our noble cavalry's flanking move. This is the first mistake of the battle. There are a couple of issues with this plan. First, left flank. The standalone hill, coupled with the forest, restrict the scope of maneuver. If things don't go to plan, my cavalry would be hemmed in and forced to charge enemy headlong instead of the planned flank. Second, in order for the pincer to work, center has to present a clear and present danger to the enemy tying them up, while I have to rely on the terrain in order to ensure that my irregular foot has some semblance of staying power. And so my center is static and allows the opponent freedom of maneuver to respond to the planned flank attacks. This is not the first time we're facing this opponent. We've met him in the early medieval bracket of the league, me commanding Rus and Fluidwil playing Scottish. As that was extremely close game, I knew that this one is going to be equally as challenging, but shouldn't be impossible to win. I'll put up a link to the other game in the upper right if you haven't checked it out already. As the game opens up, we see the Scots-Irish have a maximum number of warbands taken and has picked foot interspersed with standard foot. I'm surprised to see no Celtic chariots and severe lack of light foot. There must be more forces hidden by the terrain. As I move right flanking light foot up, we get eyes behind the hill in the opponent's setup zone, revealing a force of Celtic chariots. Seeing the amount of light chariots makes me feel a little better as that should make up most of the forces that we weren't able to get eyes on in the beginning. Our troops move up as per the original plan. Turn 2 sees skirmishing start, and we do manage to disrupt some javelin men. On the left flank, we uncover Scots-Irish Lightfoot hiding in the forest. I also realize that our noble armored horse is no match for the picked Scots-Irish foot, and decide to skirt around, moving my horse into the opening between the hill and the forest. On the right flank, I decide to chase the disrupted Lightfoot with my horse, and then manage to trap that horse with my own Lightfoot. This is the second mistake of the game. It is systemic throughout the battle. I'm making subpar decisions on the unit level, trapping my own units, not flanking, and so on. The rest of the forces here move up as per original plan. Medium foot charges out of the forest, chasing away my lights, but more importantly, putting my armored noble horse in a very unpleasant situation. The trap has been sprung, and we bundled right into it. Light chariots move towards the right flank, and while a number of charges overextend opponent's medium foot, they do manage to engage our trapped horse. I misread the situation and commit mistake number 3 on the left flank, and decide to break through the trap rather than retreat, maneuvering cavalry in order to take up favorable charge positions. Of course, with the proximity of unknown numbers of forces in the forest, this does not look very favorable at all. Furthermore, one of our engaged horses gets disordered and falls back. Already, battle is looking like it's going to be split into 3 separate segments, showcasing the issue with the battle plan I've highlighted earlier. Scots-Irish foot moves up on the right flank, working with the Celtic chariots to not only restrict movement of my cavalry, but also stop any thoughts of them flanking. Left flank sees flanking charge and more chases over light foot. We lose 3 formations within the same turn. Our cavalry is losing the light foot support they need to disrupt the enemy foot before charging in themselves. Not only that, but this also traps my commander-in-chief cavalry and allows Scots-Irish foot to charge in and tie them up in melee. The other engaged cavalry participating in the existing combat gets disrupted. And while our light foot manages to disrupt their equivalent in the forest, the balance of power is clearly not in Slav's favor here. On the right flank, our irregular foot move up in order to stop opponent double charging our cavalry. The threat of Celtic chariots forced me to split light foot in half. One half puts pressure on, but fails to disrupt the enemy foot, while the other moves up to the forest in order not to be overrun by Celtic chariots. Left flank sees light foot getting chased off and hemming in our commander-in-chief on 4 sides. Already engaged cavalry gets charged in the rear and fragments. Our left flank contained, Scots-Irish move up in the center, managing to disrupt our irregulars with their light foot. On the right flank, our cavalry gets charged by his foot and caught as they're hemmed in by our own light foot. Those systemic errors I was talking about earlier are piling up. Celtic chariots showcase what they shine at, chasing and demolishing light foot. One unit of our Slav archers gets caught, fragmented, and routed later on the same turn. And while our cavalry keeps winning combats against opponent's foot, they keep failing to cause any cohesion drops. On the left flank, we triple charge his foot to no avail as he is still holding firm. And yet again, systemic errors in judgment here. What I should have done was move into flanking position outside of the forward-facing arc and charge in on the next turn, disrupting opponent's foot on impact. There is a beam of sunshine on the left flank, however, when our commander-in-chief manages to fragment one of the formations of Scots-Irish foot he's combat with. However, this flank still looks quite lost. A symphony of errors continues in the center, with our disrupted foot, instead of falling back, charging opponent's javelinmen to chase them into the middle of Scots-Irish battle lines, exposing our flank to countercharging. After disrupting medium foot with our archers on the right flank, Slav irregulars charging, capitalizing on created advantage. Our noble cavalry moves up further on the right flank to assist in the combat with the light chariots. If we can win here, they would be in perfect position to charge into the rear of the enemy foot formation. However, engaging our cavalry near the forest is quite a clever move, as our light foot is prevented from engaging anything for another turn, as they start circling the combat from the right. The mistake of overextending our irregular foot in the center gets immediate punishment, and they run from the battlefield. More Scots-Irish foot come out of the forest, and our commander-in-chief gets charged in the flank, stuck in numbers 3-1 now. And while they do hold, they're unable to even defeat the fragmented unit they were previously engaged with. Further maneuvers flank our engaged cavalry, and previously fragmented cavalry loses over 20 men and routes from the field of battle. On the right flank, the labors of our systemic errors bear fruit, and without any avenue of escape, our trapped cavalry loses a score of men and gets fragmented. Thankfully, not all is doom and gloom, and as we finally manage to auto-break opponent's medium foot, our cavalry chases and charges Scots-Irish engaged foot in the side. Unfortunately, as their charge started in good view of the defenders, there is no cohesion test. Our streak of good luck continues as first contact is made in the center right of our forces, as the opponent charging in unit fragments itself on impact, and we manage to break them later on this turn. Finally, we see a rally of our armored noble cavalry. I decide to cut my losses on the left flank and move 2 free cavalry units in support of our center. The thinking here is that we can capitalize on our temporary advantage there and try and swing things in our favor. We also manage to break one and disrupt another unit of the opponent's light foot in the forest. Commander-in-Chief formation is slowly being ground down and becomes disrupted. Right center is threatened by 2 formations of picked warbands. I free up the corner unit by charging the second in line, but then instead of turning about and trying to safeguard my flank, I decide to charge in the rightmost unit as well, fragmenting it on impact. They do retreat from combat, but at this stage they will run at a moment's notice. Mistake number 4 happens on the right flank. I fail to consider the bigger picture and chase off Celtic chariot with irregular foot right into a perfect position to charge our engaged cavalry. That means that I'm unable to support already engaged 2-on-1 cavalry and have to face the threat of rear charge. Not only that, but it becomes quite obvious that due to their mobility, Celtic chariots are now isolating the cavalry and light foot from the main body of foot on the right flank. Which brings me to mistake number 5. While we move up a few regular foot in order to threaten opponent, crucially, nothing is moved in support of our center, which is looking mighty weak right now. That would allow the envelopment of the center to proceed uncontested. Hey, Pew Pew Meow here. If you're enjoying this video and are finding it useful, don't be shy and hit that like button. Really appreciate it. Left flank sees multiple flanking and rear charges. The only positive in this situation is the fact that relatively few of my units are holding up a whopping 9 medium foot formations of the enemy. Center sees a mild success, with one of our units getting disordered and one of the Scots-Irish foot fragmented on impact. However, the envelopment of the right side is proceeding unopposed, and soon the center will start to crumble. A number of charges happen to our noble cavalry, and while it is holding for now, it is disrupted. Crucially, far right sees Slav cavalry formation dedicated to protecting the rear charge, evade Celtic chariot, who smashes in the rear of engaged unit and fragments it. our light foot concentrates fire and disrupts opponent's formation. We charge them with cavalry, but fail to win the impact decisively. Further disruptions of our engaged units follow. I make another systemic error and engage left center with a run unit, freeing up opponent's foot to charge our irregular in the flank. On the right flank, we finally start moving up our foot in support of already engaged units, but they are too far away to start engaging anything yet. Not only is our light foot on the right flank completely out of position again, after our fragmented cavalry routes, we get chased, caught and fragmented. Crucially, we have a lot of units idling about, not moving to flank or support our already engaged units. Finally, our commander-in-chief has had enough of being ground down from every side. They break and run. Thankfully, I'm not the only one making mistakes, and in the center, instead of charging our unit in the flank, opponent decides to double charge another unit of Slav regulars in the front, which disorders them and make them disengage from combat, but crucially, does not make our line crumble immediately. A left sees further fragmentation of our cavalry, center sees the enveloping right, routing our regulars and double charging engaged unit, fragmenting it. It breaks later on same turn. While we win all the combats with our general and manage to kill over 100 men, we fail to break or disrupt anyone. On the right flank, more light foot gets chased, caught and routed. The 3-on-1 horse gets charged to being 4-on-1 and eventually fragments, then breaks and routes from the battle. Not only that, but they follow through and catch our light foot, who also breaks and runs. A lot of indecisive combats and chasing ghosts with our cavalry happens on the right flank. And yet again I repeat mistake number 4 and charge Celtic chariots, who evade right into the rear of our out-of-position irregular foot. We fragment Scots-Irish warriors engaged by our cavalry on the left flank, but another cavalry unit gets routed in return. Our general is yet again unable to break fragmented unit it's fighting. Our overextended irregular foot on the right flank gets charged in the front and rear and is disrupted. No surprise there, as I have orchestrated it myself. Right flank sees another unit fragmented, but we do manage to fragment one of the opponent's foot in return. In the center, opponent charges in with everything but fails to disrupt a single unit. Right flank sees further cohesion losses by Scots-Irish foot, softening up those units in previous engagement is paying off. On the left flank, one of our light foot gets caught and fragments, running away later on the same turn. However, armored noble cavalry finally manages to rout the foot it was fighting, and their Scots-Irish compatriots, seeing this shameful display, get disrupted and start milling about in confusion. Finally, center sees a rally of one of our irregular foot. And while we concentrate fire with our skirmishers on the left flank, they fail to fragment opponent's medium foot further. In the center, we finally manage to maneuver our cavalry to charge enemy foot in the rear, disrupting them on impact. However, left center combats do not go our way, and we lose every single one of them, incurring cohesion drops each time. The rest of the combats are indecisive. Right flank sees mixed results. We double charge his fragmented foot, but fail to break it. Slav skirmishers charge their Scots-Irish equivalent, catch and disrupt them, and Slav irregulars do manage to break a unit of Scottish-Irish foot, and their compatriots seeing this crumble as well. We do further couple of chases, but with no effect. Turn 11 sees Scots-Irish troops rallying across the battlefield. Our center crumbles. Fragmented troops on the right flank are charged, lose heart and rout. Yet again we fail to break fragmented unit that is engaged by two of our own on the right flank. And as none of our units rally, Slav army loses heart and retreats from the field of battle. Mistake number 1 was misreading the terrain and making a plan of battle on that erroneous assumption. Not only was there no scope for maneuver on the left flank for my cavalry, but my center was not able to support the flanks for them to serve their intended purpose. Mistake number 2 was systemically making subpar judgment and decisions throughout the battle, charging instead of flanking, trapping my own cavalry, and charging headlong into the enemy, exposing our flanks. Mistake number 3 was not scouting the forest prior to committing my cavalry, in conjunction with the decision to charge through the ambush. As things stood, crème de la crème of my forces ran into a perfect ambush, got trapped, surrounded, and only managed to rout 1 unit of foot from the battle. Mistake number 4 was failing to consider the impact of my decisions. This works very closely in conjunction with mistake number 2 and results in me charging into enemy light units and sets up the enemy for perfect flanking charges. Mistake number 5 was allow the envelopment of the center to proceed uncontested. A simple threat of a rear charge would have made opponent think twice before proceeding with the envelopment. Let me know what else could I have done in order to avoid such disastrous results, down in the comments below. To see how the other battle versus the same opponent went, check out this video right here. As always, thank you ever so much for watching. And remember kids, do war games, not war.